There have been heated exchanges at a Senate inquiry investigating the potential impact of the coal seam gas industry on regional Australia. Extracting the gas involves bringing large amounts of salty water to the surface to reduce the pressure in the coal seam, and landowners are worried about the potential impact on precious underground aquifers. Farmers in the New South Wales country town of Narrabri have told the Senate inquiry they're being heavied by companies with gas interests. But the companies which operate in the area say they're not bullies and they'll negotiate with landowners. Environment reporter Sarah Clark attended today's hearings.
It's some of the richest cropping country in Australia, but it's what's beneath the soil that's got farmers locking their gates.
At the end of the day, we're going to fight as hard as we possibly can to protect our livelihoods.
Doug Cush is a third-generation farmer, but he says his family's future on the land is now at stake as coal seam gas companies target this region for exploration.
Once they're in here, I believe between Narrabri and Gundawindi on the eastern side of the Newell Highway, will be lost forever.
Today, farmers delivered a blunt message to a federal Senate inquiry investigating the industry's impact on rural Australia.
Irrespective of you're on prime agro country or the greatest lump of rubbish country you've got, I would ban the whole operation until the science was proven.
Natalie and James Tidd say denying gas companies property access is their only hope.
Everybody has said no, we don't want it in our area. So, hopefully that, it's something to be proud of, I think, and it just shows that, you don't necessarily see your neighbours very often, but everyone is united.
But the gas company's next option is to take them to court.
At the end of the day, it's all we've got, and we live with the threat of arbitration now.
There is really no process. Farmers are really at a disadvantage, and farmers have no say in the process whatsoever, and that is simply unacceptable.
And it's not just landholders. One of the biggest councils in this region has also put a ban on seismic survey work on Shire property and public roads in a bid to stop coal seam gas exploration.
You can't eat coal, you can't drink gas. In 20 years' time, what's going to be happening? Who's going to be feeding Australia? And it's what we do best up here. We just want to be left alone to do it.
But one of the biggest coal seam gas operators in this region told the hearing the two industries can coexist.
It is our absolute intention to have dialogue with people and to find a cooperative approach whereby we can unlock the resource that this state desperately needs.
The farmers here are yet to be convinced.
There's been a lot of tears and a lot of worrying, and also not just on myself to watch my family go through that, my sister, and that's difficult.
Sarah Clark, Lateline.
To discuss coal seam gas mining, I was joined just a short time ago by Ross Dunn from the Australian Petroleum Producers and Exploration Association and veteran environmentalist Drew Hutton, now president of the Lock the Gate Alliance. Ross Dunn and Drew Hutton, welcome to Lateline.
Thank you, Ellie.
Hello, Ellie.
Ross Dunn, your industry's got a real public image problem, hasn't it? Whether it's access to farmland or impacts on water supplies, there's real community concern about what you're doing.
Well, this industry, I guess it happens when you've got big opportunities, but also have big challenges. There's a big opportunity in New South Wales to develop this new gas resource, this new energy resource. But in doing that, in order to get the benefits of the cash flows, the money to the state, the money to regional areas, the jobs, the services, there is a requirement for this industry also to meet the high environmental standards expected of society, and that is the challenge for us. There is also another challenge in New South Wales to recognise that development of this energy resource means that they can actually move away from a coal-dependent future, that they can move to a transitional energy future where they can reduce greenhouse gases and be part of a low-carbon future.
You talk about the environmental challenges there, but do you acknowledge that in many ways this industry's run ahead of the science? I mean, can you give any guarantees about the long-term impacts about what you're doing in terms of influence on and impacts on water and underground water supplies? Even if you look at things like the National Water Commission, even that states that the cumulative effects of multiple projects are not well understood.
Well, each of these projects, in Queensland there's 3 projects that are taking coal seam gas through to liquefied natural gas for export. Each of those projects have been through a 2 to 2.5 year public environmental impact study. Each of those projects has then in turn been assessed at the state level and again at the federal level and by their agencies. And in each case, they have received their environmental approvals with conditions which would further safeguard landholders, aquifers and the environment. We're not suggesting that this industry is without impacts. As with any development, whether it's urban development or generating the power to meet that increased urbanisation, there are going to be impacts, and it's a matter of being able to monitor those impacts and to manage them.
Drew, are that all fair points?
No, none of them fair points, really. First of all, the transition to renewable energy that Ross is talking about, that gas is a transitional fuel, it's just a load of bunkum. There's no transition being involved here. The only transition is from coal to gas. I mean, that's all. There's no state or federal government in this country that actually has a plan to transition from coal through gas to renewables. The only role they've got for renewables is as a boutique add-on, so they can take a few gullible journalists around and say, look, yeah, we've got some renewable energy here, it's really meaningful. The same with the impacts on water. What we've got here is a precautionary principle being thrown out the window by governments. They've allowed these massive industries, and these are huge. This is the biggest, if you take it all together, this is the biggest project in Australia's history. It's that big. And the impacts are correspondingly big. And they have not obliged this industry to say that they can manage the impacts on underground water. They can't. None of the not at this stage anyway, none of the major independent hydrogeological experts in this country are saying that they can, and they say that the impacts could, in fact, destabilise the Great Artesian Basin for up to centuries.
Ross Dunn, do you want to respond to that?
Well, Drew, you can't have it both ways. You can't on one hand say that this is going to take centuries to recover, and on the other hand say that it's going to have a very big impact on other aquifers. If you're saying that it's going to take centuries, well, that means then there's relative geological isolation between the area we are extracting water from and the areas from where landholders are extracting water. So if you're saying that it's going to take hundreds of years for whatever it is we do to the aquifers to repair, then you're saying that there isn't extensive hydrogeological connection.
No, it'll be different in different parts of the continent. Some areas won't take very long to recover. They might take a few decades. Others will take a lot longer. It's just the nature of the whole system.
But Drew Hutton, you're talking about recovery. I mean, isn't the point that we actually don't have any firm knowledge about the impact to start with?
No, this is outrageous. It really is outrageous that they have allowed a suck-it-and-see approach. What these companies are doing is they're extracting gas, they're extracting massive amounts of water at the same time. That has the effect of destabilising our underground water systems, especially the Great Artesian Basin. And what they're doing is, as they go, they're trying to work out what the impacts are likely to be. And here in Queensland, they've got a system of adaptive management. So if we really mess up, if we have a disaster, well, we just simply change the regime, and the industry has to make good. Now, I don't know how you make good an aquifer that's just been destroyed, for centuries, perhaps.
Ross, that goes back to my very first question. I mean, is it a fair point that you don't know exactly what the impact is going to be over the next 10, 20, 30 years? This has not been done before. No,
nowhere else in the world have they taken coal seam gas to LNG for export. But there are examples around the world where coal seam gas is extracted and studies are done on the aquifers. What needs to be remembered in this instance is that this is anything but a suck-it-and-see. If you have 2.5 years of EIS process thoroughly examined by state and federal levels and their agencies, and the cumulative impacts are considered, I don't consider that to be a suck-it-and-see approach, particularly when it's then known that across the basins, the impact of water extraction in one section is quite different from how it will impact in another. Now, each of these areas are then going to be monitored by hundreds of bores, and that is the process by which the companies and the landholders can examine just what is happening to the landholders' bores, and that's really what this is about. What is the impact on landholders' bores?
You've just confirmed what I've said, that they did not know at the start. Even their EISs that these companies did admitted that they did not know where the interconnectedness, for example, was between aquifers. And that's the key thing. Where's the interconnectedness? Where is it? What's the extent of it? They did not know that at the start. They're going to find out as they go along.
Is that right, Ross Dunn? I mean, is there any categorical statement, any categorical evidence that you do know about overlying aquifers, underlying aquifers, and exactly what the impact's going to be?
There's a lot known about it. The Great Artesian Basin has been studied for many years, the various geological layers, the aquifers, the way the water moves within those aquifers, and the amount of water there is, and how these layers, you know, lie on top of each other. What will happen with the water from coal seam gas extraction? I guess if we look at where we've already done in Queensland now for 10 years, there is no impact outside of the area where we're actually taking the water from.
But we're now talking about a vast expansion of this industry. A lot is known, but is enough known for you to be able to say now, categorically, that there won't be any major damaging impact?
I don't believe there will be a major damaging impact. I don't agree with what Drew says. I'm not as pessimistic in my assessment. And bearing in mind, I come to this job with a view where I'm probably more on the landholder side than I am on, you know, just the gas operator side, because that's been my background. So I look at this, what does this mean from a landholder's perspective? What confidence do I have that this is being done properly? And I guess another good measure of that is on the Condamine alluvium, where the landholders there are arguably more affected by the impact of water extraction in many other areas, because the coal seams there are closer to where they take the water. Those landholders in the main have recognised that there is legitimacy to both these industries, to agriculture and to coal seam gas extraction, and a lot of work, good faith negotiations are taking place to see how these industries can best coexist.
Drew Hutton, that's obviously in Queensland.
And those negotiations are taking place because the landowners there locked the gate on the company and took them to court. That's what landowners have to do to get justice in this system. I've just come from
Drew, that is not correct. These negotiations have been occurring long before any legal action, and those legal actions do not involve all the landholders.
Drew Hutton, it involves, there's some 13 families in the Darling Downs. I mean,
absolutely.
But that's not all.
The impacts of water extraction in many other areas, because the coal seams there are closer to where they take water from. Those landholders in the main have recognised that there is legitimacy to both these industries, to agriculture and to coal seam gas extraction, and a lot of good faith negotiations are taking place to see how these industries can best coexist.
Drew Hutton, that's obviously in Queensland.
And those negotiations are taking place because the landowners there locked the gate on the company and took them to court. That's what landowners have to do to get justice in this system. I've just come from
Drew, that is not correct. These negotiations have been occurring long before any legal action. Those legal actions do not involve all the landholders.
Drew Hutton, it involves, there's some 13 families in the Darling Downs. I mean,
absolutely.
But that's not all of them,
13 families in the Cecil Plains area. And they've been negotiating with the company, and they've been dissatisfied with the negotiations and taken them to court. That's why Arrow Energy is negotiating in good faith now, because the landowners were prepared to take a stand. The landowners were prepared to take a stand. Ross, I used to work with you guys in the Grain Growers Association, you and your boss Ian McFarlane, and ironically what we worked together with there was stopping mining companies coming onto good agricultural land. Now you've joined the dark side.
What we stopped there was a court system that was very unfair for landholders. That's what we stopped there.
Let me ask, what rights do landholders have?
Landholders have a lot of rights.
But fundamentally, bottom line, can they stop you coming onto their property?
Bottom line.
Well, you go back to what the process is. The government owns the resources. The government releases those resources to a company to develop on behalf of the people of the states. Whether it's owned by the state or whether owned by the federal government, that process is in essence still going to be the same.
Well, the answer then is no. Fundamentally, bottom line, there are no rights to stop you coming onto a property.
Well,
let me give you... If
I'm allowed to finish that.
Okay.
If you were to take it to the end of the line, the companies can instigate proceedings where they could access the property, but do they do it? No, they don't. Why don't they do it? Because they want good relationships with landholders. They're there for the long term. There is no point at all for a company to have poor relationships with the landholder.
Drew Hutton, these companies are making multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade investments. Is there any impetus to not get on?
Well, let me tell you the system, how it works. You've got in Queensland, you've got 20 days to negotiate. Then the company can take you to compulsory mediation after 20 days for another 20 days. Then at the end of that 20 days, they can take you as a landowner to the land court. The minute it goes to the land court, they can legally enter your property. Now, Ross is right when he says that they haven't taken any landowner to the land court, and that's not because they're wonderful chaps. It's because the minute they take a landowner, a farmer, to the land court, which then allows them to call the police in and bulldoze their way across that farmer's property to trash his land, then that's the time when the people of Australia will say, that's intolerable. Ross knows that, the companies know that, that's why they're not doing it. And that's why I invite them to do it and take a landowner to the land court. We'll supply them with lawyers, we'll back them every inch of the way, and we'll fight you, because that's the only thing we've got left. Governments have all lined up behind these companies. They don't care what the impacts are going to be. They care about the 3-year electoral cycle.
Let me get Ross Dunn
we're going to have to fight
to answer some of that. But let me couch it in these terms. If it was your family farm that you'd had in the family for generations, you'd invested for the future, and suddenly coal seam gas came along and said they don't want one well or two wells. In fact, they want a multitude of wells on your property, which is perfectly possible. Would you consider that to be fair?
I would expect in that situation the companies do what I believe they do now, where they approach it in such a way that there are no surprises for the landholder. You talk early, you explain what the system is, you explain what they've got in mind, and you allow plenty of time so that the companies understand what your business is about, you get to understand what the companies are wanting to do, and you look at how you...
But if you want to put it here, does a landholder have the right to say, actually, no, you can't put it there because that's my prime grazing land, or that's where my chickens are, or...
Well, I think if you look at what's happening on the black soil plains of Darling Downs, that is exactly what's happening. There's an enormous amount of negotiation going on before any development is occurring between the particular company there and the landholders to say, well, what is the best way to develop this difficult development country, because it's black soil, it's laser-leveled irrigation country. What is the best way that we can do this in such a way that the companies can still access the land, the surface of the land, in order to get to the resources underneath the ground, whilst the landholders can still access the service to do what they need to do to make it good.
And Drew Hutton, that is a fair point, isn't it, that there have been successful outcomes and successful negotiations, and there are some happy farmers?
Oh, some of them are happy. A lot have signed up because they didn't like the idea of having to fight it out with multinational mining giants in court, and so they figured they'd try and get the best deal they could. That's my experience of why people sign up. An awful lot of people have fought them and have locked their gate.
Well, I'll come back to the point. There is no advantage to a company.
And I'm still looking at can I...
We're almost out of time.
What Ross has just said it sounds all nice, but you get up in a helicopter at Dalby, go west to Tara, then south to Chinchilla, and have a look at the, country underneath
this
there.
comes back to the point. If you develop an area, you're going to have an impact. We've never shied away from that. And in order, as it will New South Wales...
Let Ross have the last word.
If you want to develop this resource for New South Wales for the benefit of the people, to move New South Wales from a situation where they are 90% reliant on coal for power generation, only 4% reliant on gas, if they are serious about moving to a low-emission economy, then this is their opportunity. And not only is the opportunity to actually do something positive for the climate, it's actually an opportunity to put money back into the state, back into regional communities.
So where are the low emissions coming from? The Cornell University research,
brings out a report
is both showing that fugitive emissions from coal seam gas are likely to make the coal seam gas every bit as carbon intensive.
The Cornell University work does not show that at all.
I know that you both fundamentally disagree on the emission situation and indeed on this entire question. There are so many other issues that can be discussed around this, but we are out of time. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. No doubt it's a subject we will revisit again.
Thank you, Ali. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Ali.